in, we're gonna switch to audience questions, and then Sahil will call those questions out. All right, with that said, let me hop off video, and if you want to also book it, and then we'll hand it to Sahil.
Love that. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Pulkit.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. I know it's 12 Pacific here in Seattle, where I'm based. So I'm assuming, unless you're in Hawaii, wherever you are, it's mid or late afternoon. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to host this event, this Q&A style discussion on successful product launches. We have an awesome panel here. We will do a quick round of intros very quickly, but we've got Harish, who leads product marketing for Okta. We've got Kelsey from Braze, and we've got Jackie from Pendo. Very different companies, different sizes, different stages, some public, some not so public. So you will get to hear a variety of perspectives. Our format is pretty simple today. We'll do a quick round of intros, and then we will actually I've picked up a few questions from the questions that you've all submitted. So thank you everyone for submitting those questions and upvoting them. I've curated a few of them, and we will have our panelists answer those questions around product launches. But as Alex said, keep putting questions through the Q&A box in the Zoom chat right now. And so in about 25-30 minutes, we will do some live Q&A using the questions that you've submitted and do some real-time Q&A over there. Hopefully you get to hear some very interesting perspectives and experiences, not theory, but practical experiences from our panelists. But with that, let me quickly introduce myself. So my name is Sahil Sethi. I've been doing product marketing for more than a decade. This is what I do. This is my jam. I've worked with organizations like Microsoft, with Qualtrics, with Klaviyo, with BetterUp. And as Alex said, I recently wrote a book called Product Marketing Level Up, which is to help all of you level up your craft, your impact, and your career. I'll be moderating the discussion, and let me hand it to Kelsey, because I see you on the top left of my screen for an introduction. Quick icebreaker question, Kelsey, as you introduce yourself. Tell us, what was your very first job? I know that many of us don't start in product marketing. This is, we all discover product marketing along the way. So very curious to hear, what was your very first job and how did you end up in product marketing?
Yes, that's always a fun one. I call it my career squiggle. By way of intro, I'm Kelsey Nelson. I lead product marketing at Braze, which is a customer engagement platform. And I actually began my career in teaching. So I taught middle school English and history in the Bay Area. So that was a fun journey. Got a lot of good practices for teaching that I think can apply to even enablement today. So there are some fun parallels. But I made my way into communications and then product marketing, and actually had a chance to work with Harish while at Okta. So maybe that's a nice transition over to you, Harish.
Excellent. Yes, I was just going to say, if everybody else drops, we can just have our one-on-one from last year that we just pick up where we left off, Kelsey. Yeah, thank you all for the opportunity. And, and I see we've got 70 plus participants, which is great. You all have day jobs, so appreciate you taking the time. Harish, Peri, yes, as Sahil mentioned, I run product marketing at Okta. My first job, I was an engineer. So I wrote code when Java was popular. I worked at a bank before it was cool and called fintech, when it was just you're a programmer and you do what the traders say. Back in the day on the trading floor, that was me at UBS, actually. For those of you who know New York, 52nd and 6th, right by the very first halal cart that was ever, before they became a chain. I frequented them when it was like $4 cash. So, back in the day. And then, yeah, since then, I've been an engineer. I've led engineering teams. I've been a product leader, led product teams. I've spun up business units within large companies. But I always seem to find my way back to product marketing because it's the right intersection of knowing the product and selling the story. And so now it's been a little bit over a year at Okta. And yeah, if you're going to be in London, Identity Tour, check it out. Come on by. Beyond MFA. That's what we're talking about. Kelsey knows what we're talking about. All right, Jackie, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. That's so fun that you two worked together before. And I thought we were going to maybe go back a little bit farther than our first professional job. My first real job was at Accenture, what's now called Accenture. But my first job ever was filing papers in an office. So, I got minimum wage for that one for the summer. That was fun. No, so I got my start in product marketing having worked at a startup in the professional services division and made my way into what was then called product management, but as many of you know, the product marketing and product management careers are very intertwined. And so I found myself, because it was a startup, basically doing everything. And then over the years, I would shift between product management and doing everything, and doing product management and doing everything. And I finally made the jump to just product marketing about 11 years ago now. So that was, I think, as you say, Harish, you say was the right fit for you. Product marketing is my love as well. And so I'm now full on to the right side, not the dark side, but the right side of the product management, product marketing continuum. So
Love that.
and
Love that.
I should probably mention I am from Pendo. Pendo is a product experience platform that does anything from product analytics all the way to in-app guides and product discovery. So building feedback cycles for product managers to learn more and execute better on their products.
Love that. Thank you, Jackie. We've got engineers, we've got teachers, we've got management consultants, and
Yes.
that's the beauty of product marketing. Let me quickly jump in with the questions. The first question everybody asks is whenever it comes to product launches, how do you define success for a product launch? And maybe if you could give us an example. Who wants to go first?
I can kick off if nobody's going to jump in. So I think first, before I define success, we kind of have to talk about the types of launches, because there are very different ways of measuring success, at least how I look at it, in terms of the type of launches. And I like to tier them out. One of my previous companies called them gold, silver, bronze. My current company calls them level 1, 2, and 3. And so for what I would call, that top level, the big, let's call it a brand new product or a very, very large monetizable feature. So we just launched our brand new Listen product last week. We're in the midst of a rolling thunder of a launch, building towards a GA next week and a big event next week. But that kind of a tier 1 launch, I would say I would measure based on a combination of awareness, engagement from top personas, adoption by existing customers to measure that, sort of revenue, new and expansion revenue, and as well as retention revenue, if that was something that, if it was a product that you were potentially bringing to the market or a feature you were bringing to the market that you thought could help with retention. And then obviously from an external perspective, pipeline as well. We look at pipeline from that awareness generation. And awareness could be anything from, social engagement to website traffic, that kind of thing. I can keep going, but I'll give the others a chance to chime in as well. So.
Thank you, Jackie. Kelsey, Harish.
Yeah, I can jump in next. Echo everything that Jackie shared. I've also had t-shirt sizes, has been a fun, it's an extra large. One thing I'll add just to kind of layer on to that is I've seen in the past be really helpful is getting really clear on sort of what the life cycle we expect to look like for that particular product or feature. So for example, is the goal of launching this feature maybe to help drive adoption? Is it to help improve win rates? Is it to just sell a new thing, right? If you're launching a new product. And so I think making sure that you're really crisp on what is this trying to do in our business cycle helps you get clear on, and we'll chat a little bit more about this later, but what is specifically needed to achieve that goal when you're putting together that launch plan. So I've had products in the past where maybe it was certainly directly monetized, but we actually saw it as something that was really going to drive more stickiness for the solution. And so if stickiness is really our goal, that's an adoption oriented metric that we're really going to drive. And so all the things I echo again that Jackie called out around awareness and pipeline are going to contribute to that, but being really targeted on that North Star about what is this really going to do for us from a business standpoint will, I think, help, especially as you start to look at how do we want to adjust these metrics and how do we want to adjust tracking of those metrics as we go forward over time? That's one thing I will call out as maybe an add to what Jackie had here.
Yeah, and then I would almost look at it. I almost take your question and almost take it a little more in a more of a meta direction, which is the metrics that you measure. They're going to be varied. Like we're mid-cap public company, like we have different goals that we go after. And we operate in a highly competitive industry, so it takes a lot to move the needle and differentiate. So we're looking at different metrics than maybe what even different between Braze and Pendo and other folks on the call. I think what's really important is identifying who's going to have an opinion within the company and getting them aligned on those metrics very early on. And so it's almost like the metrics themselves will make themselves pretty clear, right? Like if it's even if it's a tier 1 and you're moving it to, let's say, an early access phase, meaning it's fully live and it's sellable and it's quotable and it's feature ready, but it's not available for all regions, so it's going to be in one area, so it's early access. Like being very clear that that's what it is, and we're looking more for not to change the trajectory of revenue, but more to get customer feedback. And if we get some revenue along the way, great. And so it's like that, being able to articulate and then literally get every person that you think is going to have an opinion to agree that these are the metrics and we're not going to deviate from that, is almost more important than the metrics themselves. Because otherwise, its launch means something different to everybody, depending on the day, depending on the phase of the moon. And that change management is so important as product marketing. It's just speaking from some ups and downs of experience.
And I think
and the governance that goes with that too. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I was just gonna say, I think your point about the size of the company and the goal of the company too, and the phase of the company is really critical to that, because a CEO of a brand new 20-person startup might want revenue, but really there's at that stage, you're still going to just go for awareness. I feel like even if it's a big giant tier 1 launch, you're still going to have to go for awareness, and you might want to build those beta customers or those early adopter customers in. Whereas a company like a larger size company that's already has 1,000 customers, awareness is not going to be as important, even if it is a tier 1 launch. So yeah, I think your point about the size of the company and the goal of the company as well, and the stage of the company is spot on.
There's also persona, right? So if you're building developer tooling, you want weekly drops, because it's otherwise you're almost out of the game. Your audience is going to say, hey, you guys aren't innovating fast enough. Like, where's my demos? Where's my code samples? And like, you need to match you have to match the pace of change management of your target. And so if
Uh-oh. We've got an echo.
Did Zoom launch a new feature
better?
while we were
There we
the
go.
echo feature? Yeah, so it's like you gotta match the pace at which your audience can absorb the change. And you almost it's like an adrenaline hit to launch something, but if your audience doesn't care, game over. You get one shot at these things. So
Well said. That brings me to my next question. Clearly, the answer to what success looks like depends on who the audience is. Something we grapple with is, are your launches for existing customers or are your launches for prospective customers? And so I'm curious, how do you differentiate between launch tactics when it comes to prospects versus new logos?
I can jump in first on this one. I think this certainly will be downstream, or I see this as downstream of what are those goals that we're trying to achieve with this launch. So if it's something that we're trying to drive more stickiness, right? So drive more retention, adoption, that's largely targeted towards existing customers. And so you may orient this launch towards that audience versus something where you're launching a net new product and we're trying to build awareness. So there will be, I think, some inherent distinguishing of tactics depending on what the objectives are of the launch. But generally, I think how we've seen this be successful is sort of what altitude are the resources going to be provided for those different audiences. So it might be, for example, if someone is newer to your company and we're trying to build some awareness that this is a feature or product that is going to be exciting and relevant to them, really bringing that forward, versus an existing customer is probably at least somewhat bought in on the overall value of the service that you're bringing to the market. And so it's a little bit more on how is this additive? How is this going to help continue you to see success? And so how do we start to really pull some of those levers and bring folks the right message for where they are at their stage of the journey with your brand?
Harish, Jackie.
Yeah.
I
Oh, go
was
ahead. Jackie, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say, I would also add for an existing customer, I feel like there's a lot that you can do in app as well, and so for that whether you have a PLG type of product or whether you don't, whether you have a full-on sales-led product, you can still do a lot in app in terms of putting out release notes, putting out a resource center, putting out a guide or a tooltip that identifies things, even putting in what we call at Pendo is like that empty state, right? Where so if they don't own that product or feature, and this is a monetized product or feature, you can put something where they get a tour, a self-guided tour of that, or a guide, or put your brochure out there. And so I feel like when you're focusing a release or a launch on an existing customer base, you have to do a lot more in-app to build that momentum.
And the other thing is, so it's interesting, right? The perspectives are different because we're each at different stages and the speed. Like for me, always top of mind is change management because we have whatever, like 18, 20,000 customers, Fortune 500, Fortune 100, huge global conglomerates, all the way down to like 100-person shop that is like using us for basic login, and they each have different rates of change absorption. So there's almost two parts to the existing versus new. Is like, what's the cadence at which you're executing your launches as a company, and then what's the value messaging, right? Because the value messaging is very different, right? And as Kelsey mentioned, existing customers are generally bought in, so they're going to want to know the 201, 301. Show me the demo. Show me how this works. Where's the help documentation? How can I turn this on quickly? And new customers are going to more want to know, or prospects, how does this fit into the overall value story of why I should come over to Okta, for example? What we've seen is existing customers get more annoyed when they're not in the loop because there's an expectation like, hey, you made a commitment to us, we made a commitment to you, like keep us more in the loop. Stop just using your launches as a hook for new customers. So it's almost Pendo is a great at this. Like the in-app stuff is a core part of how you can make this happen. But even like, you almost have to strip down your story. If you have a CSM, you want to strip down your story for the CSMs and really be like, this is why the value matters for you now that you've already made this investment with us. So there's like a few different things. The cadence is one thing. We've seen that moving everybody to the same cadence does work because it gives more moments for the company, but the messaging is so different. It's really, really important that you treat your existing customers with respect, reduce the selling part of it, focus on the immediate value, and like get to the details quicker. And the newer customers are more like it's part of the bigger story, like, oh, is this going to help you reduce cost or boost revenue or increase cybersecurity or whatever it is. Those are things, but like how you connect it to that is more important.
Harish, one thing that you said I have a question on. So in terms of starting with your customers first that you mentioned, which I think is a great idea, do you early announce it to your customer community or in a newsletter or something like that, even before the prospect announcements go out there? Is that something that you recommend?
It depends, right? It's a company size thing. We're actually actively moving the whole company to a standardized quarterly cadence, and so we're so as part of growing up, we're actually moving away from 100% engineering culture where it's like the code is ready, let's ship it. Kelsey knows what I'm talking about. And like moving to a world where code is ready doesn't mean you can ship it. Code is ready means it can go to production with the feature flag turned off, but you batch it all up on a quarterly cadence and make big moments every year. So we're moving to that kind of launch week construct, over time. But we're doing it for everybody at the same time, right? Because what it does is each new thing that you do, you have to think about the change that has to permeate through the whole organization. Let's say, because if you start creating separate classes of like CSMs get it first and then AEs get it, they talk to each other, then you have more chaos. And so like being able to control, and look, again, these are like more maybe larger company problems, but I know I've said change management, I should get a nickel every time I say it, but like that's a core part of how you manage your launches. And also, if you batch things up, you're able to create bigger moments, right? Because let's say you're engaged with Gartner and analysts, they want bigger moments. Press wants bigger moments. Smaller sound bites don't catch anymore. So we find that moving to bigger, fewer moments lands, and doing all constituents at the same time seems to work. It's just what you tell them is different.
We had that at one of my previous companies, and I'm sorry, Kelsey, I'm hogging this up, but I just want to say on one thing. We had that at one of my previous companies where we would release every other week just to get it out, and that was, as you mentioned, more customer focused, and they would see things in app, but we would theme release and organize things into a bigger theme for the external announcements and hold those, whether it was GA in the product live or not, behind a feature flag, whatever, we'd hold it for that themed external announcement at a specific time. We didn't limit it to like the Salesforce approach of 4 times a year or 3 times a year at a specific interval, but we did theme it up and hold it at, like you're mentioning. And it actually worked well. It did build that big, ticket story, but it also let the customers still get their smaller features faster.
I love this discussion because this is actually a great segue into the next question, which the audience asked, which was about, there's 2 schools of thought in launches. There is the 2 big moments a year, and then there is the ongoing communications whenever it's ready. And there is everything in the middle, from quarterly themes. And so we've already started this discussion, but what do you see as a best practice in your company? And could you probably give an example of how you've seen that work, whether it's a quarterly drumbeat or a twice a year drumbeat or an ongoing drumbeat, and how do you think about the difference there? Harish, you mentioned you're moving to a fewer, better model.
Yeah, I just want to give Kelsey because I don't want to jump ahead.
Oh, no, it's fine. So I think one thing we've seen at Braze is that we actually do try to get updates out at least monthly with customers. We are in also a really competitive space, right? And so making sure that we are sharing regular updates with our customers about what's coming up, what's been released, making sure that we have those regular touch points, I think has been really valuable. What I think is to Jackie, what you called out is how do you balance that with some of those bigger awareness driving moments? And so keeping that steady drumbeat, I think on a monthly has really shown how do we constantly innovate and really validating that versus when do we want to think about those big moments? And those, I think, similar to what Harish called out, moving to a less frequent basis, whether it's quarterly is probably what the market can bear, right? Like if you're giving too many big moments a quarter, you kind of lose, it's no longer a big moment. Now it's just yet another moment. And so try to keep those to a few a year. And I do think that kind of depends on where your space is, but I like that on a 3 or 4 times a year basis, really making those elevated moments. And you can also, just because you've shared an update on a monthly does not pull you back from being able to make that part of your big moment. And I do think you can mix and match and keep those conversations going, and you're not losing anything by having both altitudes and leveling some of those up and saying, hey, you've heard a bunch of updates from us. Now let's talk about what does this mean for you, and what is maybe that kind of marquee next step we're going to make on this bigger vision.
I think that's a really good point, and it sort of shows as we've all been around for a while, right? We all probably got our start in the waterfall days when it was building up to that hard moment, and you didn't have the opportunity to pull something into a themed or launch announcement or a big ticket announcement that was released before because you already did that one. And I think what your point is, now that we're in that agile state, there's nothing preventing you from talking about something you released in April or March now that it's May, right? We should all be flexible enough to, if you're doing a May launch, maybe you include March, April, and even some June stuff, right? You don't have to be afraid to talk about it in that big ticket approach at that set, like you said, 3 to 4 times a year, or at Pendo, we're focusing on our big launches come at Pandemonium. And then we're looking for maybe a second point or a third point at most on the other parts of the year. But you can also, combine things in that are already released, like you mentioned, Kelsey. I thought that was great, or even about to be released, not out there yet. And I think we have to be flexible and comfortable enough to allow for that to happen. And some people aren't comfortable, and you have to get change management. Harish, I'm going to take your nickel from you for that one. You have to get your stakeholders comfortable with that approach too, if that's the route you're going to take. You have to really set their expectations ahead of time for what's going to happen if you're going to pre-announce something in one of those big ticket moments.
Yeah. When we or whoever, when you move to a more cadenced model, if you do it right, this is always a question for product marketers. Oh, how do I be more strategic? You can actually change the rhythm of the whole company. That's a very powerful thing, because what happens is when you create, so we're seeing this, when you create, we have 4 moments a year. It's a newer muscle for us, but July, the next one is Octane, which is also in October. That's going to be our next. And then, then basically at the beginning of the fiscal quarter, because we're like Salesforce, we're 1 month shifted out from the regular fiscal. But if you create that cadence, then you can back calculate everything against that. And what you do is you can actually map a whole calendar for all work streams. So, you can say what sales hears about is everything that actually shipped and that's skewed and that's sellable, right? But what customers hear about is you can overlay a product roadmap cadence on that, and that can be on the same launch calendar or slightly staggered. And there's expectations, like what sales hears about is what's ready to sell. What product talks about is the roadmap stuff. What analysts hear about is these 4 big moments. What the press hears about are headlines that come out of that. And if you, shameless plug, but if you go to Okta release overview, like we have now 3 quarters of this already, where there's a theme, there's a video, there's assets for all the different constituents. And essentially, what you're able to do is you're actually able to craft the story of the whole company. Because then, knowing that there's a train, then there's less stress that, oh, my product is not going to get airtime. You actually, it's a cultural change phenomenon too, where the product teams are not like, my product. It's like, okay, you either get on this train or get on the next train, but it's not a big deal. Like the train is always moving, and it de-escalates some of the weird tensions that may exist between product and product marketing. And the other thing is, you have to be very sensitive to enterprise sellers. So for those that are in the enterprise world, they have a lot coming at them. And like, if you keep throwing new features, they're barely trying to like close deals with what's in bag right now. If you throw new stuff, they have to do the mental math of how does this change the value prop. And so if you do the work of packaging it all up and saying, this quarter, we're going to focus on security, right? I know I've said security a few times, that's the game we're in. This is how we're going to make you more secure for new attack vectors and, increase the attack surface, whatever it is. Then it gives them a story, and they can actually take that story and then go sell it. The last point I'll make is, once you create a regular cadence, you can actually introduce governance. That's a huge thing, because everyone is guilty of, oh, we decided that this is going to be GA. Who decided it's going to be GA, right? Was it a cross-functional team that has skin in the game? Well, if you have a train that always leaves, you can predetermine who gets on that train 2 months ahead of time. And then you can do that next quarter, and you can create launch governance of, is this ready to exit beta? Is it ready to exit early access? Is this ready to exit GA or go global GA in all regions? And so you can create the governance around it. But all of it goes back to, if there's a train that's always leaving at a certain time, you can then create different cadences at the company level to get on that train.
I love this. This idea of themed launches. I feel like every company is doing themed launches these days, and the theme is a 2-letter word which starts with an A and ends with an I. But last question before we move to the audience Q&A. Changing tracks here a little bit. We all talk about the importance of having customer validation in your launches. I don't think any company does good launches now without a customer story behind it. So curious to understand tactical guidance on how do you engage with customers? To what extent and what depth do you actually go and do customer engagement and validation for your launches? And how does it differ if it's a beta launch or an early access versus a GA launch? So curious to get some tactics from all of you. I'll start with Kelsey again.
Oh man, I'm up first. So I think in general, what I've seen be successful is if PMM is really tightly baked into the product lifecycle, right? So being with your product management partner from beta all the way through to a GA launch, I think there's a much more natural cadence and understanding of what's working well with customers. And then as you're starting to craft messaging, craft positioning, it's a natural part of the conversations that you're having when you engage with those beta customers and then start to develop all of those different assets. It also becomes a much more natural ask then if you want to have a validation as a part of an EA launch or a part of a GA launch to say, hey, do you mind if we share a quote about the success you've seen because you've been working hand in hand with the product team and the customers to say, hey, do you mind if we spotlight this? Or do you mind, even if maybe they're not ready to say we've seen success, but we're excited about what the path that this feature will take us on or this product will take us on. And so I do think it's really, really important that, I'm sorry, there's a lovely plane going by here, that the PMM team is really tightly coupled throughout that journey. And I know that's, how do you balance then of the many priorities that are coming on the PMM plate throughout that life cycle, especially for a more mature product. I think to Harish's point, different stages of company growth, that process will probably look different. But to me, that's the key to that success and making sure that you have the validation you need. So it's not a scramble in the last 2 weeks and you're trying to write a press release and then suddenly you need a quote from someone. And that becomes a much trickier ask.
On our side, for a tier 1 launch, we always have at least a set of beta customers, if not, close to 50 to 100 beta customers. And so I think you're absolutely right, Kelsey. Like when you have that tier 1 launch, you're starting the process with those customers early and you're getting product marketing involved. Maybe they're not in every single conversation that the product managers have, but they should be early involved, earlier than you think, so that you do have the comfort to ask for that quote, to ask for that validation, and to ask to be able to use that in your launch materials. And even for some of our tier 2 launches, we also do betas, or at least we're gathering, even if it's not a beta, we're gathering feedback we drink our own champagne, so using our own tools, we're gathering feedback that could be potentially sourced for quotes or for validation to use in a press release or other things like that. So I love your approach to really getting in there early with the product marketing team and making sure that they're as aligned with those early customers, those early adopter customers, to get those that validation, that feedback, and those quotes, those important quotes, as much as possible.
Yeah, and building on that, it's like, what kind of customer feedback are you looking for? So, there's one thing that we have spent a lot of time on, but we finally landed, is the notion of launch playbooks. So we have kind of, again, this is big company problems, but for each stage, for each tier, and then for each stage, so going from beta to early to GA to global GA, we have like copious lists of what needs to happen to go from stage to stage, who does it, and then there's agreement from that team that they have to do it. So getting customer feedback is one of them. As you move to later phases, getting customer testimonials is another thing. Like getting a hero customer that we can take on stage at Octane, for example, is also, it's in the list, everyone's signed off on it. Because I saw a question in the Q&A about when do you get social engaged. That's part of the playbook. So like if you have a new PMM onboarding and the first job is to launch something, just follow the playbook, because all teams have signed off on the work to be done. And that goes back to change management. But going back to like what type of feedback you need, early on, it's likely going to be product market fit. Like, does this even work? Does this do the things you want, customer? But then later on, it's commercial model. Like, can we actually sell this? Because I think a lot of teams skip that step. They're assuming if you got product market fit, it's going to sell itself. But people forget, at least in enterprise, like that's product market fit is just the start. That's like just the ticket to get in. Then to play the game, you have to figure out the commercial model. Like, who are the buyers? What's the selling process? How do we position it to get through procurement? What kind of discounting structure do we need? Is this a director level sale? Is this a C-level sale? Like all that type of stuff has to be figured out once you have a more baked product and you're going from early access to GA. So I would say customer feedback early on is like pure product stuff, and then customer feedback later on is commercial viability. Those two things, and this is maybe specific to enterprise, but like that almost, if you don't have commercial viability, product doesn't matter. Like it doesn't even matter. If you can't sell it, nobody cares.
I
thought
love
of
this.
one other point too that I wanted to make as well as you were talking, which is if you've got a startup, right, where you don't have existing customers and you can't do those betas and you can't get that actual customer validation, there's nothing preventing you from going out to put prospects and saying, is this something you would use? And using that in your press release or something like that. Maybe you can get somebody to agree to say, hey, yes, this is a use case I find valuable. So even if you can't get the actual customer usage validation, you can still potentially get use case validation.
I love this. I love this. I think the biggest takeaway was get involved early in the product life cycle, which sometimes we forget to do because we get so caught up in running the launch side of things. But the earlier you are on with the PM counterparts on roadmap, on engaging with customers, the easier it is for everyone. Thank you. We'll quickly transition to the audience Q&A. There's a bunch of great questions, but I'll give a quick plug once again to the giveaways we have at the end of this hour. So if you're staying here, we will announce 3 books to give away. We have Product Marketing Level Up. We have the book by Mary Sheehan on product launches, and we have the book by Martina Lochengo on loving tech products. Loved is the name of the book. Let me quickly start with one of my favorite questions in the audience, which we do not cover so far, which is how do you continue the momentum after the launch? A lot of the times we get wrapped up in like building to a successful launch and the eyeballs and awareness and the buzz it generates. But let's talk through what are some things you've done to continue the momentum after the product has been launched.
I love this question because I think a launch is just a moment. It's just an awareness moment, right? It's if anything, it's like, especially if it's a GA launch, your product has already been on a journey with customers. You're now making it more visible and more aware. And so when you think about, again, are we tracking towards driving sales and pipeline? Are we tracking towards adoption? Whatever your North Star metric is, I think there's some really fun and creative things you can start to do now that it's kind of out in the wild. How do we want to continue driving engagement and really unlock and achieve those goals? One of my favorite examples, actually, I'm going to steal Harish one from Okta, but we had a product that was really focused on, it was a no-code automation tool. And it was really exciting to think about how do we start to unlock the community aspect of this and really use that as a flywheel to drive more engagement and to deepen product usage. And so then we start having customers share with each other. They actually started doing meetups. They just all love talking to each other. We had lots of puns, flow puns. We had a flow case. We had a flow packathon. And it really just, I think you start to get really fun and creative ways to start to build and drive community. Similarly, at Braze, we start to see a lot of what we talk about here is inspiration, right? We sell to marketers, which is really kind of an interesting meta thing that I moved from cybersecurity to selling to marketers. But the tool is half of the journey, right? Half of it is how do I bring to life amazing ideas? And so part of that is how do we map the technology to cool ideas that are out there in the world? So amazing customer stories. We have an in-house basically agency creative team. How can we help bring those to life so that you can see value? It's not just about the product itself, but about how you can see value out of it. So I think it's what comes after the launch. That's the magic. The launch is just the moment. That's my favorite part.
I love that. I love that. Let me quickly go through more questions. So I'll pick one panelist for each of them. I have so many great questions. So I'm combining 2 different questions here, which are addressing a similar topic, which is how do you decide who to loop into for the planning and the execution of the go-to-market launch? And I know, Harish, you touched upon sort of when do you bring the social team in, but assuming there is a launch playbook, there's a bunch of teams involved. Tell us a little, and Harish, this is for you. How do you go about picking the launch stakeholders, and at what point of time do you engage them into the launch process?
Yeah, I mean the easy answer is the more people need to get involved as you get closer to GA. If you have that approach of going beta early, there are different companies with different terminology, but more people get involved because you're deploying more resources, and it's a bigger cross-functional effort as you're getting closer to GA. But what's important is getting that alignment upfront and just like deciding that and holding to that decision for at least 6 months, maybe 8 months, maybe a year, because otherwise you spend more time arguing about cross-functional ownership versus actually getting the work done. So that, and a lot of that is even within marketing teams themselves. Like, when does campaign get involved? When does digital get involved? When does social get involved? When does comms and PR get involved? When does AR get involved? Like that upfront, it's if you don't have a clear definition that is really sanctioned by your CMO and CRO, like it's something really meaningful that a PMM leader can drive, is like just getting everybody into a room, having the difficult debates, duking it out, but not leaving the room until you have a simple table that says team involvement by phase, and or like what percent of time they commit to it, like something that just shows it, get it signed off, and then just stick to that. Because otherwise it's like everyone's feelings get hurt all the time and you just want to get past all that. Product marketing is mainly change management, man. It's like, it's just, you're like in the middle of things that are so emotional and you have to bring the whole company along. So that's the game.
That's why we do this, right? We love this.
Yes.
I love the approach. Love the approach. Duke it out. That's hashtag Duke it out. That's my tagline for today. Jackie, question for you. I love this question because you talked a lot about the agile approach to building and launching products, and you don't need, frankly, for a product to be ready. A launch can re-communicate thing that was already out there. It can announce new things, and it can also pre-announce new things. So let's double click on that. And the question here is, how do you hold feature releases? And maybe this is about roadmap selling, but your sales teams wants to sell something. Your CSMs want to pre-communicate a feature. It might save a renewal. The feature isn't ready. There are so many things vying for attention in that launch window. So how do you decide? How do you triage these things? And and it's an open-ended question, but help us think through the thinking here.
Yeah, I think this is where the tight connection between product management and product marketing really comes into play, because you need to do two things with product management. First, you need to understand how ready is this feature. And if we don't think it's like super ready, we want to maybe slow roll it and see how things go, then that tight connection with product management will give you that quality. You can then make a decision as a product marketer to say, no, you know what, we're not going to externally announce this product yet, or this feature yet. This is one that we're going to put out there in product, but we're going to slow roll it. We may sort of show it to only a handful of customers, or 10% of your customers, or 50% of your customers, but not externally. And I think the other flip side to that is also you need that tight connection with product management when they tell you this is something that has to go out there. This is like either hugely meaningful for our existing customer base because they've been waiting for it for a long time, or this is something that we think that the external customer base is going to be really excited about. And obviously that's done a lot in conjunction with product marketing. So I think that tight connection between product management is the only way you're going to be able to know when you should hold a feature and when you should push it through, and when you should kind of slow roll it or speed it up or early announce it. And the early announcing, I think, is maybe less about the feature readiness and more about possibly a big event, like like we've been talking about these events that we all have, or possibly an external event like a Gartner or Forrester briefing coming up that you have to get something in before that, or for a waiver, an MQ or something like that. So the pre-announcing maybe is less so about how ready the feature is and more so about what the possible impact could it have externally. And then the tight connection with the product manager on when to hold something is really more about how ready it is and whether you can feel comfortable pushing it out externally in a bigger announcement, for example.
Love that. Love that. I'm going to end with one last question, and maybe we'll go around the room for this one. This came up in the submission elsewhere as well, which is a lot of the times for launches, we talk about generating external announcement with customers, with the market, with prospect, with analysts. But good launches also involve generating internal buzz and internal announcement and getting all your employees to rally behind it. So very quickly, do you do that? How do you do that? I'll start with Jackie because you.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. And I think, we have a monthly product spotlight that we can use as a dedicated training time for our internal teams. We also have bi-weekly town halls that we can announce things in if we want to squeeze it in outside of the product spotlights, for example. I do think it's really important to, especially as you're building up to a large launch, to early announce as often as you possibly can, even if it's just a quick heads up. Hey, this is coming. Here's why we're excited. Here's what the value messaging is, so that the broader than the product teams can get excited about it. And then you keep reiterating it, right? This is what I told you I was going to tell you, and I'm telling you that same thing again.
Yep.
So use my mantra is use every opportunity that you possibly can, whether it's a team meeting or one of these bigger things like our product spotlights or our town halls. Then this is what I told you I'd tell you. This is what I'm telling you, and this is what I will tell you again next month, because it's this. We're going to keep pushing this.
I love that. I love that. Doing product launch town halls is my favorite thing. So much excitement. Kelsey.
Yeah, I mean, I echo the urgency and frequency. I also think, and maybe this ties a little bit to Harish's earlier question on when do you bring different teams in? Yes, I think at larger companies, you have to be a little more, you have to be very clear on coordination and when, but I also think what I hear is there's not too early for most teams, right? You can't tell someone early enough so they can start getting excited. They can start building their materials. They can start saying, how am I going to incorporate this? And I think while there's always an art to it, like we don't want sales to maybe run out and start pitching a product that's not quite ready for the market. But in general, I think the earlier, the better. So you can build that enthusiasm and they can familiarize themselves with what you're going to be doing and why. I also would very much encourage when you're engaging with different teams to make sure that how you explain this to them is in reference to how it helps them achieve their goals. So if it's a salesperson, this is going to help you make your number by. If they're a marketing person, this is going to help you drive pipeline by, right? And so very much making sure that anytime you're engaging with internal teams, it's really, I mean, it's kind of, it's obviously what we do with customers, but take that same lens when you're talking to internal teams. This is why this matters. Then the excitement's naturally going to build when you do that.
Love it. Harish, bring us home.
Yeah, and the last, just to close out everyone's points, for internal, it isn't just customer and sales. It's also you want to make every employee feel proud of why they work there, and especially in tech, right? Ultimately, you're building things and you're selling things, and that's the core. I mean, again, this is an enterprise thing, but like you want to remind them like what's the real value that you should care about in this launch? Why does it connect to our company values? Why does it connect to day in, day out the value we bring to our customers? And what's the soundbite that you can take away for if they're in some hypothetical elevator doing a hypothetical elevator pitch, like why should they care, right? So I mean, I always believe that we're all in sales. All employees should be always selling the value. And so you want to give them a reason to believe. So if you can get a company all hands for launch, which we do, by the way, so then that like dedicated just for launches, and it's different from the regular all hands cadence we've just started this recently. So you want to give people a reason to believe and reaffirm like why they work there in the first place.
I love that. Maybe I'll try to start that at Pendo.
Make it happen.
Make it happen. Maybe that's a motto for the year. Make it happen. Thank you so much, everybody. Alex, back to you to announce the giveaways.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you, panelists, and thank you, everyone.